The alien commander, clad in a uniform with a gleaming metallic sheen that signifies their rank, stood at the entrance to Earth's most elite military academy. They gazed at the sprawling campus, tall buildings, training fields, and state-of-the-art facilities, mentally comparing it to their own rigid, sterile institutions. This academy had a strange energy about it. It hummed with activity, yet it wasn't the mechanical precision they were used to. Instead, it felt alive. Almost chaotic. The commander's visit here was no mere formality. Their species, the Zarl, prided itself on efficiency and order. Alliances with other races were only forged when mutually beneficial, and those who showed weakness were quickly subjugated. Earth was an anomaly, a civilization that had somehow survived despite its lack of technological superiority. In their view, humanity was a species caught between primitive impulses and advancing technology. And yet, remarkably, they were still thriving. As the commander walked through the academy, they noticed human soldiers drilling in lines, yet something about their demeanor was unusual. The soldiers exchanged glances, jokes, and even laughed as they prepared for exercises. The commander frowned, noting that even the officers didn't seem bothered by the lack of silence. The Zarl trained in silence, precision, and routine. Each command was followed immediately, each movement planned. Here, it seemed as though unpredictability was woven into the very fabric of their training. The commander recalled the traditions of their own military, a culture in which individuality was suppressed, emotion seen as a flaw. Decisions were calculated, with no room for the human elements of intuition or instinct. War, to the Zarl, was a series of flawless maneuvers, each soldier a piece in a grand strategy that only served the whole. But as the commander watched these humans, they couldn't deny a creeping sense of curiosity. They found it peculiar, almost troubling, that such a relaxed attitude could exist within a military setting. Surely, this was an undisciplined force by any other species' standards. As the commander continued to observe, they noticed students engaged in mock battle scenarios. These weren't the silent, stoic simulations of Zarl drills but instead chaotic, loud, and filled with energy. The students shouted strategies across the field, encouraging each other, laughing and teasing as they devised creative ways to outmaneuver their opponents. They showed an unfiltered camaraderie that defied everything the commander had been taught to expect in a military academy. One student leapt from behind cover, cheering as they landed a successful shot on an opponent. Their comrades erupted into cheers, some patting the student on the back, others shouting advice or friendly taunts to the defeated opponent. The alien commander's brow furrowed in confusion. There was a fluidity here, a willingness to change plans mid-movement, driven by the situation and encouraged by those around them. This was nothing like the rigid, predictable patterns the commander had expected. This was disturbing. To the Zarl, war was logical, rehearsed, and performed like a well-oiled machine. This chaotic, almost playful approach seemed reckless, even suicidal. And yet the commander couldn't deny the effectiveness behind it. They'd read reports of human tactics on the battlefield, decisions made seemingly on impulse that led to unexpected victories. Watching these cadets, they wondered if this strange camaraderie, this unrestrained energy, was the source of that anomaly. Perhaps humanity's strength lay not in their technology or physical prowess but in this peculiar dynamic, one that defied the commander's understanding of what constituted discipline and unity. The alien commander observed as the human cadets assembled on the training grounds, dressed in gear that allowed for free movement and flexibility. Despite the Earth's natural gravity being weaker than the Zarl's homeworld, the drills were demanding, even brutal. The commander watched in silent confusion as the humans ran through grueling endurance tests, pushing themselves with an intensity that seemed, to Zarl eyes, excessive. Their species didn't believe in expending unnecessary energy. To train until near collapse was seen as wasteful, even dangerous. Yet here, humans took pride in pushing past fatigue, as if suffering was a part of their training. The commander found the sight troubling. Cadets navigated complex obstacle courses filled with mud, water, and high walls that required climbing ropes and helping hands. When a cadet struggled or faltered, others immediately stopped to help, supporting the slower ones without hesitation. The commander tried to reconcile this with the Zarl's own approach, where the weak were left behind, a natural selection process that ensured only the strongest endured. Here, the humans were wasting time, yet, paradoxically, their unity appeared to fuel their strength. It seemed that by uplifting each other, the humans could endure more, push harder. Cadets who had reached the end of the course first would call out to those lagging behind, shouting words of encouragement. Their laughter and cheers punctuated the air, even as exhaustion covered their faces in sweat. It defied logic. How could they find humor, even joy, in something so demanding? They treated challenges not as insurmountable obstacles but as shared experiences, drawing motivation from one another in ways that were foreign to the commander. The more he observed, the more unsettling the scene became. Next, the humans moved to combat training. The commander's eyes narrowed as the cadets engaged in sparring exercises that didn't follow the regimented sequences they expected. Movements were unpredictable, adapting mid-action based on the opponent's choices. There was no single pattern or formula. Instead, it seemed every cadet developed their own approach. Some dodged with nimble footwork, others pressed forward with direct attacks, and still others used feints and unexpected maneuvers to throw their opponent off balance. There was no standard strategy, and to the alien commander's eyes, it looked chaotic, almost reckless. In Zarl combat training, soldiers drilled a specific sequence, each movement chosen to minimize risk and avoid deviation. Here, it seemed that risk was the very fabric of human training. Cadets would shift, lunge, and pivot in unexpected ways, and their trainers encouraged it. Occasionally, one would stumble or miss, and rather than reprimand them, trainers would ask, "What went wrong? What could you try differently?" This emphasis on trial and error, on learning through mistakes, was baffling to the commander. In Zarl training, error was unacceptable, a sign of failure. Here, it was a teaching tool. And then there was this strange word they kept repeating, instinct. Cadets were encouraged to rely on it, to trust their gut when facing uncertainty. It was a concept the commander found bizarre, almost primitive. Their own species relied solely on rationality, drilling every soldier to execute maneuvers based on pre-planned tactics. Instinct was unpredictable, flawed, and undisciplined, qualities that were seen as weaknesses in the Zarl military. Yet, as the cadets fought, adapting on the fly, it became clear that this instinctual style was effective, even powerful. The more the commander watched, the more apparent it became that humans had a fundamentally different approach. Instead of avoiding chaos, they embraced it, channeling it into something coherent. Where the Zarl prized strict control, humans sought to navigate unpredictability with flexibility and confidence. It was clear that this wasn't some weakness, as the commander had initially thought. Instead, it seemed that humans had mastered a new form of strength, one that was fluid and adaptable, one that thrived in chaos. The alien commander observed as the cadets filed into a dimly lit hall, facing a large screen that displayed a virtual battleground. This wasn't a simple combat simulation. The scenario unfolding was layered with moral dilemmas, with humans making split-second decisions that defied simple logic. The cadets were tasked with both protecting an outpost and ensuring the safety of simulated civilians caught in crossfire. To the commander, this was absurd. Protecting non-combatants was inefficient, a distraction from achieving victory. Yet here, humans prioritized it. As the simulation ran, the cadets encountered situations where they could eliminate enemy forces swiftly but with potential civilian casualties. Instead of seizing the opportunity, they hesitated, choosing paths that kept bystanders safe, even when it meant risking themselves. The commander's confusion grew. These cadets were willingly making choices that lowered their own survival odds, prioritizing something as intangible as a moral code. The notion was alien, literally and figuratively. For the Zarl, there was no higher priority than self-preservation and success. Mercy was a foreign concept, a weakness that had no place in war. Even more unsettling, the commander noticed how these humans seemed to draw strength from their emotions. A particularly intense simulation showed one cadet grappling with the loss of a simulated comrade. Rather than faltering, this cadet seemed to grow more determined, pressing forward with a fierce resolve. Their emotions, grief, anger, even fear, fueled their actions. The commander was baffled. Emotions were suppressed in Zaro warriors, seen as distractions from logical thinking. Here, they were being harnessed, turned into something powerful. Humans didn't see their emotions as vulnerabilities but as a core part of who they were as fighters. They fought not only to win but to protect, to honor, and, as the commander realized with a sinking feeling, sometimes even to avenge. The simulation scenarios escalated, testing the cadets' willingness to make sacrifices. In one scenario, a cadet chose to divert enemy attention away from their team, drawing fire onto themselves to allow others to retreat. The action was praised by their instructors, who explained that self-sacrifice was sometimes necessary for the greater good. This was unfathomable to the commander. In their species, the individual's survival and the success of the mission were paramount, with no room for needless loss. And yet here, humans valued this act of sacrifice, seeing it as noble rather than reckless. They were willingly putting themselves at risk for others, motivated by values that couldn't be easily quantified or explained. Watching this, the alien commander felt an unease deepen within them. These cadets were motivated by concepts that defied tactical reasoning. Honor, empathy, mercy, qualities that shouldn't belong on a battlefield, were somehow integral to the humans' approach to war. They didn't fight solely for survival or conquest but for ideals, for things unseen and intangible. The commander realized with growing dread that this made humanity fundamentally unpredictable. They weren't constrained by pure logic or survival instinct. They could act out of compassion or fury, risking everything in the process. Each simulation reaffirmed the aliens' discomfort. The cadets were trained not only to think on their feet but to act from the heart. This was not something the Zaro could prepare for. In a confrontation with humans, there would be no guarantee that they could anticipate humanity's next move, precisely because humans were willing to follow a path that defied survival, if it meant upholding their strange, intangible values. The alien commander observed as the cadets assembled at the edge of a dense forest, gear minimal, supplies sparse. This final test was not just a drill but an exercise in survival, where the cadets would have to locate and capture a hidden target deep in the wilderness while evading obstacles and each other. No instructors would be present to guide them. It was an unsupervised, high-stakes exercise designed to simulate the raw, unpredictable nature of combat. The commander was intrigued, but certain that without rigid structure, this would devolve into chaos. As the exercise began, the cadets dispersed into the forest, quickly blending into the shadows and moving silently across the terrain. The commander expected a series of predictable maneuvers, but what unfolded was something else entirely. The cadets improvised, using their surroundings to their advantage, crafting makeshift tools and camouflage from branches, leaves, even mud. One team used large stones to build a temporary blockade, another crafted primitive traps to deter and confuse opponents. They adapted quickly, their movements erratic and unconventional. It was clear they were analyzing the environment in real time, modifying their approach with each step forward. The alien commander felt a pang of something close to fear. These humans weren't just following instructions, they were thriving in the absence of them. The commander noticed how some cadets crafted weapons from seemingly insignificant materials. A broken branch sharpened to a point, rocks fashioned into throwing tools, vines used to create snares. They were resourceful, even when faced with limited options, and seemed to find opportunity in every disadvantage. Unlike the Zaro, who required specialized tools and supplies for each mission, humans seemed to carry their arsenal within them, turning the most mundane objects into means of survival. They used every inch of the environment as if it was an extension of themselves. The alien found this creativity both remarkable and disturbing. Such ingenuity was wild, uncontrollable. The intensity of the exercise heightened as teams clashed in the woods. The commander observed cadets pushing through physical exhaustion and injury with an almost frightening resolve. When outnumbered, they didn't fall back or surrender. Instead, they fought with even more intensity, moving with a ferocity that defied the commander's understanding. They struck with precision, even resorting to close combat techniques that looked brutal, almost primal. One cadet, cornered by multiple opponents, resorted to tactics that the alien would have deemed desperate, yet effective. The Zao military would retreat in the face of such overwhelming odds, calculating that survival outweighed any potential gains. But these humans? They seemed willing to fight until the last breath, refusing to yield even when retreat was the logical choice. One encounter left the commander particularly shaken. A cadet, outflanked and unable to reach his objective alone, took a risk that stunned the observer. He shouted to his teammates, drawing attention to himself and luring opponents away from his squad. This self-sacrificial maneuver was baffling. By willingly putting himself in harm's way, he allowed his team to slip past, unharmed, toward their goal. He was captured moments later, but the diversion allowed his squad to complete their mission successfully. The commander was speechless. In Zao terms, this act was senseless. Life was a resource too valuable to waste. And yet, here was a cadet willing to sacrifice himself with a fierce, uncompromising will, prioritizing team success over his own survival. Watching these cadets persevere against every disadvantage, the alien commander felt a wave of dread. This wasn't a mere survival exercise. It was a revelation of the lengths humans would go to when survival was on the line. It wasn't their tactical precision or technology that made them formidable. It was something deeper, something almost impossible to quantify. Humanity's will to survive seemed boundless, driving them to improvise, to adapt, to press on even when defeat seemed certain. The Zao believed strength came from controlling chaos. But these humans were different. They embraced it, let it fuel them, even if it meant embracing a ruthlessness that chilled the commander to their core. As the last cadets returned, exhausted but victorious, the alien commander felt an uneasy sense of awe. What they had seen was more than training. It was humanity's raw survival instinct, fierce and unpredictable. As the alien commander walked back through the halls of the academy, their mind was filled with the images and sounds of the past few days. They recalled the cadets training with laughter and camaraderie, pushing each other through grueling obstacle courses, displaying an inexplicable determination. They thought of the cadets on the training grounds, using instinct, emotion, and an utter disregard for standard tactics to overcome obstacles. And then there were the memories of the survival exercise, the way the cadets had adapted, fought, and even sacrificed themselves with an intensity that still left the commander unsettled. It was clear to the alien that humanity's approach to war was unlike anything they had ever encountered. Where the Zaro valued order, precision, and calculated control, the humans embraced chaos, risk, and improvisation, drawing strength from places that seemed illogical, like emotion and camaraderie. These humans were not just soldiers trained to fight. They were individuals who brought something deeply personal and unpredictable into battle. The Zao commander realized that for humans, war wasn't simply about victory. It was about protecting something, whether it was a person, an ideal, or a cause. This was baffling, but it explained a lot. The commander now understood why humanity's reputation had spread unease among the intergalactic community. Humanity was unpredictable and capable of adapting to situations that would leave most species at a loss. They didn't see war as a mathematical equation but as a struggle of wills, fought with passion, empathy, and a willingness to sacrifice. In the Zaro's strict society, every action was meticulously calculated for maximum efficiency, with little room for instinct or selflessness. But these humans? They thrived in situations that were uncontrollable, leaning into instincts and strategies that should have been reckless, yet somehow worked. And that was what terrified the commander most. Humans didn't just fight for survival. They fought for ideas that could not be calculated or understood in purely logical terms. Honor, sacrifice, and protection, these were concepts alien to the commander's culture, and they lent humans a strength that was as irrational as it was potent. This made them both awe-inspiring and deeply disturbing. The alien realized that, if provoked, humanity could be an enemy more relentless than any they had encountered. No calculation could account for what a human would do when driven by the need to protect, to sacrifice, or to honor the memory of a comrade. As the commander left the academy, they looked back one last time, taking in the sight of the cadets as they resumed their training. There was a strange sense of admiration mingling with their unease, a respect for this species that could fight so fiercely without ever losing sight of what they held dear. It was unlike anything the alien had known, and it made them question everything they had previously believed about war and strength. Returning to their ship, the alien commander felt a somber weight settle upon them. They made a mental note to caution their superiors about humanity. There would be no easy way to understand or control this species, no simple strategies that could contain their unpredictable resolve. The commander knew now that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, not simply for their weapons or strategies but for the fierce, unbreakable spirit that drove them. Humanity was both an incredible potential ally and a terrifying possible foe.